yeah, and surreal. It just doesn't make sense.
Everyone thinks they know you. Very few people, I guess, know you properly. What has it been like for you to go through this extraordinary political maelstrom?
God, there's like so many facets to that answer. I mean, it was completely shocking at first. I was pretty established. I had my fan base. I was well known in the adult industry. I had been a contract star for a long time, both as a performer, writer, director, all of that stuff. And I had really solidified my place and where I wanted to be there. So there was this I'd been a contract star for a long time, both as a performer, writer, director, all of that stuff. And I had really solidified my place and where I wanted to be there. So there was this instant explosion. But my fan base switched. The people that had been my followers, my fans for the longest time were a completely separate demographic than the ones I was totally being, swarmed with. I was dancing in strip clubs, which I had always done, but used to be I'd go on stage and most of the people would be, white guys in suits, very much like you. And then suddenly overnight I walked out on stage and all of those guys were gone, and it's gay men and trans people and women, a lot of women.
Really?
Just this whole other crowd and dynamic. So that was, I guess shell-shocked would be the thing. And then just the misconceptions and the shock that came with that. I'd been in porn for a long time. I had a thick skin. I wasn't surprised by being called whore, slut, or, all of that stuff. But it was the being treated inhuman, next level, which was really, really shocking. And then that narrative started to change, and people started to call me really crazy things, like a hero and this champion for the Me Too movement. So then I started to feel like I was being pulled in all of these different directions where people, sometimes on purpose, sometimes inadvertently, were trying to use me to fit their cause and their narrative and what they wanted to get out of it. And that was never the case. I was just telling the truth.
What I've been struck by is a lot of women, I know actually, quite high-profile women, they find you very...
wanted to get out of it, and that was never the case. I was just telling the truth.
What I've been struck by is a lot of women, I know actually, quite high-profile women, they find you very admirable. They think that you've actually grown to represent female empowerment, the way you stood up to power, the way you've refused to back down, the way you fought your corner, and the way you defended your industry when many people have, as you say, tried to sort of dehumanize you and shame you for it, and you've had none of that.
Right.
Has that been nice for you to see a lot of women actually come around and now be on your side?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially, people who work in the adult industry. It was a big deal for me. There was all these misconceptions that people in our industry either work in that business because they can't do anything else, because they're too stupid to do anything else, or they're broken, or they're, failed at mainstream actresses or whatever. I'll tell you right now that some of the smartest women I've met have been in the adult industry, So that's really cool to sort of see us taken a little more seriously. You can't really shame somebody who's been seen naked everywhere. What are you going to do? Release nudes of me? Ooh, please do.
Good for business, right? So Donald Trump yesterday became the first former president of the United States to ever be arrested, to sit in a courtroom facing criminal charges. Did you watch it?
A little bit, yeah. It was on. I mean, it was on every channel. So I try not to pay too much attention, because it just starts to the gravity of the situation, and it has nothing to do with Trump, and it has nothing to do with Stormy. But when you look at it as a whole, this is really happening in our country, and no matter if it goes in his favor or my favor or Democrat Republic, it's going to just be more divisive. And it's at first I thought I'd be really excited. I thought that when that day came, because I didn't think it would, and then I really didn't think it would. I thought, I thought he was going to get away with not being held accountable. So when I found out that it was coming, or potentially coming, I thought that I would feel excited and vindicated. But it was kind of anticlimactic.
Was it? How interesting.
Yeah.
When you saw him in the court, what did you feel?
part of me was, finally like he had to go in and be under the rule of someone else. He had to obey the judge and walk through like the king has been dethroned. He's no longer untouchable. And nobody should be untouchable. It doesn't matter what your job description is, whether you're the president, you should be held responsible for your actions. But the other side of it was like, this is someone that our country elected and chose. Was there no better option?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this is just, honestly, there's a range of emotions, but I think sad was the one that was the most impactful and shocking for me to feel.
How weird is it? You're Stormy Daniels, and you had a perfectly nice life, really, until recently with all this sort of mayhem. And suddenly, there's this moment in American history, and it's happening in a courtroom, and it's only really happening because of you. I mean, if you chart back the genesis of this court case, if he hadn't, through his lawyer, which is what the allegation is, paid this money to you, he wouldn't be sitting there.
Right. And that's a lot, a lot of the nasty messages and stuff I get really feel like it's my fault that, that I've made America the laughingstock, or I'm the fall of democracy. I wish I had that much power, but
your only crime, it seems to me, is that you got paid. Well, you got paid $130,000, and someone's got to explain why you got paid that. I mean,
right, which I didn't even realize the gravity of the situation at the time, or the repercussions of that. But I'm not responsible for all of his bad behavior or the charges against him by any stretch. I'm sure there's just more than we can even imagine. I think he even goes on trial in a couple weeks for rape. It's not I'm not the fire. I was the spark that lit the fuse that blew up the keg.
Do you think that this is the right fuse to light? Putting aside your own feelings about it all and what's happened to you, there is an argument that I've seen this actually from media across the divide, really, liberal media as well, saying they don't think there's enough there to justify putting a former president through this process. Do you think, you've touched on this, but do you think it's healthy for America and democracy to go after Donald Trump over this particular thing, or would it have been better to wait for what some would argue are the more serious things, January 6th, the Georgia phone calls, the possession of potential classified documents and so on?
So I haven't, to be completely honest, I haven't read the indictment, or I have no legal knowledge of it. But I agree with you. To me, those are such more significant crimes. You know what I mean? My thing is one person. And obviously it's the most important thing to me because I am me, and it's selfish, my selfish opinion. But the January 6th, look how many people got injured, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems like that's a bigger thing. But if this is what leads to it, I can't help but wonder if there's something we don't know.
Right. Well, there is a belief they may not have put everything into what was already in the public domain, so we may have to wait and see. You weren't asked to give evidence to the grand jury, but you may be asked to testify if this ends up as a trial. How do you feel about potentially testifying in a trial that will be watched around the world?
Anytime you're up in the public eye, it's scary. I used to get scared giving an oral book report in school. So, it's daunting, but I look forward to it. You know what I mean? Because I have nothing to hide. I'm the only one that has been telling the truth. And, you can't shame me any even more. So I feel like if they don't, it paints the picture that they know something about me that makes me, untrustworthy or not reliable.
So you want to have...
I do. I think having them call me in and put me on the stand legitimizes my story and who I am. And if they don't, it almost feels like they're hiding me, and people automatically assume I would, that she must not be a good witness. She's not credible.
So there's no doubt if they ask you to testify, you will testify.
Oh, absolutely.
You told the Times newspaper in London last week, I've seen him naked. There's no way he could be scarier with his clothes on.
Valid.
It's a funny line.
And true, I stand by it.
Do you want to see him jailed? Not necessarily for this particular indictment, but just generally, would it give you any kind of closure with your time involving Donald Trump to see him jailed?
specific to my case, I don't think that his crimes against me are worthy of incarceration. I feel like the other things that he has done, if he is found guilty, absolutely, because a bigger problem is that if these allegations against him or whatever else that we don't know yet, he is found guilty or the evidence suggests that he is or whatever, and he doesn't, that it's going to just basically, I mean, it opens the door for other people to think they can get away with doing that and worse.
One of the problems with this, particularly actually the indictments involving you and Karen McDougal, who's the other woman who received a payoff, it's become very politically toxic because Republicans, and I understand this, they say, look, it's different rules for Donald Trump to what it's been for Democrat politicians. And they cite John F. Kennedy, John Edwards, Bill Clinton, all had similar scandals, some far worse. None got indicted. That there seems to be a political bias there.
That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, because if you want to look at the positive in this, is that we have made progress, in our justice system in our country, and for women. You know what I mean? Like, if those other presidents had done today what had happened then, would it be treated the same? Or is it specifically just people screaming, this is a vendetta against Trump? But let's for a moment here pretend that it was another president or Clinton today and this happened. I mean, look how...
I think that's right. Post Me Too.
Exactly.
I think there probably would have been actually a different attitude to a lot of these former Democrat politicians.
That's what I hope and believe. You know what I mean? Like, people just trashed Miss Lewinsky and all the way back through history. And I would like to believe that if those things happen now, that it would be different. Of course, he's going to spin it, and the Republicans and the MAGA people are going to spin it and say, like, it's just because it's him. But is it really? You know what I mean? Like, I'm hoping that it's just us moving forward. And you could apply that to, the way that, racial crimes are handled, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that it's hopefully a sign of progress.
And actually everybody, whoever you are, however powerful, you should be held accountable.
Oh, absolutely. But in this case, it's a sex scandal. It's a woman speaking out against somebody in power. And they want to say it's just because it's him. But I would like to believe it doesn't matter that it's him. He just happens to be the one now.
You were a registered Republican.
Mm-hmm. Still am.
You still are?
Mm-hmm.
So for the Republican...
That's my favorite. You just made a whole bunch of people watching this pee their pants.
Right.
That just blows their whole thing out.
I mean, a lot of them probably don't realize.
I know. It's an easy thing to look up.
Have you voted Republican?
I have not in the last election.
Did you vote
I didn't vote.
Did you vote for Trump in 2016?
No.
You didn't? You never voted for him?
No, I did not.
But you have voted Republican before?
Mm-hmm.
And you never voted Democrat?
No, I actually didn't. I mean, that was so long ago that I didn't vote, which is a terrible thing to say, but, we should all vote.
Well, I do think people, they'll be surprised.
I know. And the whole reason that I registered and got him, I feel like that movie, they just keep dragging me back in. Like, I have no political aspirations, not interested, try not to be interested, and it just keeps happening. Like, that's how the whole being a registered Republican came about, was because of the Draft Stormy campaign in 2009, which I didn't even know about. And the only reason I got involved is because I was mad at the guy for using my name and pictures without my permission.
And I think you had a brilliant, when you ran against him for the Senate, and you had a brilliant slogan, which was screwing people honestly.
Also true.
I mean, I love that, because that was extremely pertinent to what we're now talking about, obviously. The Republicans who have a problem with you say that what you're doing is deliberately trying to derail Donald Trump's 2024 presidential campaign.
He doesn't need my help for that. He's going to do that on his own.
But has that even crossed your mind? I mean, do you think he should be allowed to run again?
It is a free country, and what I'm surprised at is that the laws allow him to. As it stands now, I was equally surprised. I was like, oh, surely someone who's indicted and whatever would be exempt from being able to run. Shocker to me last week that there's no rule against it.
Well, he could actually be convicted and go to prison.
Right?
And still be president of the United States.
That's the most absurd thing to me.
That blows my mind, actually.
Me too. I was like, wait, what? And that has nothing to do with him. He could just be dude A and dude, you know what I mean? Like, that just seems like beyond my comprehension. But I guess they never thought they would have to make that rule.
Jenna Jameson, a fellow adult entertainment star, said recently about you, the left looks at her as a whore and just uses her to try to discredit the president. The right looks at her like a treacherous rat. It's a lose-lose. Should have kept her mouth shut, her trap shut. What do you say to that?
Part of that statement, I think there are people that agree with that statement. You know, they, like I told you earlier, people took my story, which is my personal thing, and just me speaking out and protecting myself and standing up to bullies and, you know, defending myself against these personal attacks, to try to fit it into their own narrative. Whether it was, you know, the Republicans saying that the Democrats sent me there, the Republicans trying to say I was their champion. I mean, the Democrats trying to say I was their champion, or the Me Too movement, or, you know, everybody tried to use my story to fit their own.
They're all trying to use you.
Exactly. And so part of that is true. And I hate to agree with anything that Jenna says, but part of that is true. I am horrified and extremely disappointed that this woman who came from my industry, from the same company that I was with for 17 years, and says just keep your trap shut, but she should be ashamed. She has a daughter.
Do you think she means it in the sense of you can't win, so why even try?
I don't know how. I'm not going to presume to know what she meant by it, but none of it's good.
Donald Trump pled not guilty to all the charges. He's always denied having sex with you, but he's never explained why, if that's the case, you ended up being paid $130,000 by his lawyer.
Right.
There's an inconsistency at best about that position.
At best, yeah. I mean, he's full of inconsistencies. Like, I mean, somebody should ask him that question. You know what I mean? Like, but it seems pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Like, you have these people that want to say that I was a prostitute and paid that night. So then I had this whole other subsect, I don't even know if you know about this, of sex workers and escorts pissed at me for ruining business.
Really?
It's like a doctor, lawyer, like client privilege thing. And I was like, if that had been the case, I wouldn't have said anything. And if I was just trying to get attention, I've had sex with some way hotter people that are famous. I would have told one of those stories. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a kiss and tell. As a matter of fact, I took the money because I didn't want anybody to know. But there's that thing, like, if there was a transaction that was arranged and that's what I went there for, then why was I paid over a decade later? And there's a couple things that, as I've been mulling this over, pretty obsessively in the last 2 weeks, like, because it doesn't matter how many times you put a fact out and you try to tell people that they just, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to call me a name, fine, that's your opinion. If you think I'm fat or whatever, and I'm not going to try to change your opinion about porn, whether you don't agree with it for ethical, moral, I'm not here to do that. I'm also not here to, like, change your political opinions, your stances on something. But when you show a piece of evidence that's irrefutable and it's still just, you know what I mean? Like, hey, I met Trump in the golf course at the, at that event in Tahoe in 2006. I wasn't paid until over a decade later. So how is that being paid for sex? I mean,
that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
I'm going to come to the meeting. I actually have a personal involvement in one part of it, which you probably don't even know about.